As politics in Central and Eastern Europe becomes increasingly volatile in the super-election year, press freedom is at grave risk. Throughout the pre- and post-election periods, independent media faced numerous threats, including verbal and physical assaults, cyber attacks, smear campaigns, and vexatious lawsuits. In Poland last October, the civic coalition led by Donald Tusk's center-right civic platform defeated the right-wing populist Law and Justice Party, which had steadily captured the media during its 8 years in office. Civic platform secured victory in the European Parliament elections in June this year with 37% of the vote. They have promised systemic reforms, including ensuring the independence of public service media. Although there is hope that this democratic shift in Poland will lead to crucial media reforms and remedy results of the media capture, the path ahead is filled with obstacles. Meanwhile, Slovakia has undergone 3 elections in the last 11 months, which included parliamentary, presidential, and European elections. The parliamentary elections last September brought back populist Robert Fico's Smer party. The Smer party came second in the European elections, beaten by the liberal pro-European opposition party Progressive Slovakia. Hostility towards independent media has been a significant part of Smer's political and election campaigns. This hostility has been exacerbated by the assassination attempt of Prime Minister Fico. Bulgaria, on the other hand, saw historically low voter turnout in the recent General and European Parliament elections, which were held on the same day, with only a third of eligible voters casting ballots. As public participation wanes, the implications for Bulgaria's concentrated media market are immense. As the dust settles on the European Parliament elections, and Central and Eastern Europe gears up for more elections on local and national levels, we analyze the state of press freedom in Poland, Slovakia, and Bulgaria. We also delve into the media environments in the pre- and post-election periods and examine the major challenges journalists face when covering elections. This is Media Freedom in Focus, a podcast hosted by Media Freedom Rapid Response, or MFRR, which is a consortium of press freedom organizations from across Europe and is co-funded by the European Commission. And I'm your host, Teona Sefniashvili, Europe Network and Press Freedom Coordinator at the International Press Institute, a global press freedom organization and partner of MFRR. Today, we are joined by the members of International Press Institute's Central Europe Independent Media Network, Patrycja Maciejewicz, Head of Business Desk at Polish daily Gazeta Wyborcza, Hanak, journalist and host at Slovak news website Aktuality, and Petrov, international correspondent at Bulgaria's daily Dnevnik. The Central Europe Independent Media Network is supported by the National Endowment for Democracy, and it brings together leading independent publishers from the region to report about the growing threats to press freedom and independent journalism. Patrycja, Peter, Angel, thank you very much for joining in. It's a great pleasure to have you here. Patrycja, I would like to start with you. In Poland, we have seen really important developments in the last few months. Basically, over the past 11 months, since the right-wing populist Law and Justice Party lost power to the civic coalition, the media landscape has undergone major changes. Can you please walk us through these changes and explain how the press freedom situation has evolved?
Hi, Tiana. Thank you for having me and letting me speak about media situation in Poland. When we are going to describe media landscape after the election won by pro-democratic bloc, we have to get back for a while and say briefly what happened during 8 years of Law and Justice ruling. So basically, the public media were captured and subordinated by government. Media coverage was replaced by pure propaganda. And the previous government used all possible resources and power to influence the media. And I would like to just remind the fact that state-owned refinery company bought the chain of local newspapers, very influential, with a lot of readers. And the political pressure was put also on private media, with attempts to change the law limiting the operational scope for them, cutting off from financing and advertisement budgets from state-owned companies, up to the harassing and intimidating media by Slavs, strategic lawsuits against public participations. So there was no doubt that media landscape is highly polarized and the public media need a deep reform. But the way in which it was delivered was very dramatic and based on a shaky law foundation, I would say, and made the whole process quite arguable. The new government fired TVP, so that's then the abbreviation of the Polish public television executives, and took its flagship news channel off the air, citing that there was lack of impartiality. And although it was obvious that public media needs severe change, and knowing that the legal framework changed by previous government made it utterly hard, human rights organizations criticized the way the changes were handled. So it was the starting point for the coalition. And in Poland, we have two councils regulating the media, and both are highly politicized. And the whole turmoil led to a situation that we had public television with a kind of dual governing, and the National Media Council appointed its own new governor of the TV, and the administrative court didn't accept that though, but the situation was shaky and quite bizarre, I would say. And so having this summary, we can get into the next era of Polish political reality. And I would say that the issue of media freedom has other scenes. I would mention here a particular one issue, and it is media and big tech companies' cohabitation on the market. Mm-hmm. We observe that media are put in an inferior position toward platforms, which benefit from our work, use our content, and don't pay us nearly at all. Media appealed for amendments in law on copyright, the law in which implements EU directive to protect our interests and secure our position on the market. And regarding the role the media plays in protecting democracy, controlling the ruling powers, fighting disinformation. But unfortunately, our appeal was rejected by politicians in parliament. We found politicians playing hand in hand with big tech. So now I would say that political pressure is not so severe on media in Poland, but we have other obstacles we have to face.
Thank you so much, Patrycja, for this concise and yet comprehensive overview of the press freedom in Poland before and after elections in autumn. So the aspects of media capture that you have outlined are present very much also in Slovakia, especially those aspects that were present under the rule of law and justice. Petr, over the past 11 months, Slovakia has undergone 3 elections, and hostility towards independent media has been a significant part of electoral campaigns and also broader political rhetoric. Could you also walk us through how populist Prime Minister Robert Fico's comeback to power has impacted the day-to-day work and operations of independent media and the press freedom situation in Slovakia?
Well, yes, it has impacted us a lot, which means, for example, that the government is basically ignoring the independent media. They don't go for interviews with us. They often don't really answer our questions. They go, for example, for interviews to disinformation media and to disinformation actors, and they even weaponize these kind of disinformation actors against the media, against journalists. That's just one thing, right? And the other thing is that the government has just this week, actually, the law is valid from the 1st of July. They have completely abolished the public service institution, RTVS, that stopped existing. They basically renamed the institution as they have set it up again as not really public service anymore, but as something completely captured by the government. So the body that will elect the general director will be completely formed from the nominees of the current governing coalition, either from the majority in parliament or from the government ministries themselves. So that's what has just happened here. Now, also, they have the government, Mr. Fico, namely, he has blackmailed private media. The biggest Slovak private TV, Markiza, was blackmailed by Fico in a way that he has recorded a video saying, well, if you don't change your stance against the government, we will look into your finances. We know how much you have earned from state advertising. And this was a signal to the owners of TV Markiza that maybe not just the state advertisement, but also other businesses of the owner, because that's Czech oligarchy group PPF that is supplying trains for Slovak government, or supplying a system that is operating the payments for the highways, etc. There are a lot of businesses, multi-million businesses of this company that owns Markiza with the state. So it was a signal for them that they would probably lose more money. So what happened is that just a few weeks after this Fico's video, they have changed the director of news, and there is there was something like a small uprising in the TV because of what the new management did there. There was a public protest of a prominent host of the most popular television political debate that he basically protested against what is going on. He said urbanization of media and censorship of information in the news and the discussions is taking place in Markiza. So there are these three things. They ignore traditional media, or they use the disinformation media against us, even to discredit journalists. They have just captured the public service media, and they also blackmail or try to collaborate, try to do something with the private media.
Thank you, Petr. The situation is indeed very grim, and I would like to go back to discussing the problem of emergence of alternative media outlets that are weaponized against legacy or mainstream media. But before, I want to hear a bit more about Bulgaria from Angel. It's also quite interesting what's happening there, because early and general elections and European Parliament elections were held on the same day, but the voter turnout was historically low. Only 1/3 of the eligible voters cast their ballots. Angel, what do you think contributed to such low voter turnout in the elections in June?
Well, our political crisis has been going on for 3 years. I think it's difficult to summarize it to give viewers a bit of a context, but I think one sentence enumerating the periods of the last 6 elections will be enough. April 2021, July 2021, November 2021, October 2022, April 2023, and June 2024. So these are all parliamentary elections that we've had over the last 3 years. And you can imagine the voter fatigue. So much so that around midday on election day, the Central Election Commission said that for an hour or two, turnout at European elections had been higher than turnout at national elections. So this does not give as much credit to European elections as is an evidence of complete disenfranchisement, of complete apathy of voters after so many elections. Because people know who will make it into parliament. People know what they pitch to voters. Even though political life has become a bit more exciting with one more party entering, which is a strange, very niche party, very mildly nationalistic, it actually counts on support from only 1.5% of eligible voters at such time now. Because if you have around 5% of the votes collected, they're given for it, it's just 1.5 of all who have the right to vote. So basically, the share of people who go to vote is very low because people are tired of the inability to form a government. If one big party said they would put the head of the other in prison and then they set up a rotating government, of course, this could be twisted as an integrity issue. One could say, how do they work with this party if they just wanted to throw its leader in jail? They say, of course, the one party replies, we have a crisis, we have the Ukraine war, we have geopolitical shifts, so you don't have other options rather than form a pro-Western bloc, as the so-called pro-Euro-Atlantic coalition, the term we have used for a year now. But then each of these parties has to speak to their own electorates. And what has happened in Bulgaria is that public life has been reduced to a battle between core constituencies, between core voters of the biggest parties that fight each other, that smear each other with discrediting material. And you can't properly make any policy out of this. You just make politics that goes on repeat and repeat and repeat, and nothing really happens. Nobody knows what the solution would be. But you can imagine that if there's no one single player managing to draw the attention of Bulgarians who are notorious for, and have been notorious for centuries, for distrusting political authority, it's very difficult for us to get on our feet and to imagine an outcome different from the elections compared to what we have today. Even as we speak, an attempt is being made in parliament to form a government. We don't know, maybe after the podcast, there will be a government. But even if there will be, it will be short-lived. So basically, apathy, lack of new ideas, lack of leadership, lack of a desire to admit that policies have to be built upon one another, not begin from scratch every time. This kind of timelessness that Bulgarian politics has suffered from for 3 decades is now manifesting itself in the crisis we have.
Thank you very much, Angel. Also, we mentioned like this emergence of social media outlets and also this kind of, let's say, dodgy alternative media. And in Bulgaria, it seems like social media is much more popular source of news than in other European countries, according to 2024 digital news report by the Reuters Institute. One exception there is Greece. Otherwise, social media is growing in popularity in terms of the consumption of news. And meanwhile, there is also a decline in the consumption of mainstream and legacy media, both print and television, and also digital news outlets that are independent editorially and financially. How do you think this emergence of social media as a significant alternative news source and declining popularity of legacy media consumption affect this political crisis and polarization, and to some extent also the election results in particular?
Well, I realize it might be a bit shocking even to see such interest in online media in a country which, according to the same report, has the lowest internet penetration in Europe, among the countries surveyed, of course. But I think it's pretty clear that Bulgaria is now catching up with something that has been happening in Western and Northern Europe for a while, without it having the protective mechanism, the shield of robust, functioning, the autonomous or sustainable legacy media that could sustain any blow to their any challenge to their authority, which has arisen from social media everywhere. But this Bulgaria's media landscape has not been very robust over the past decade. If a challenge emerges, it's very difficult to overcome. So, on the one hand, you have the fact that Bulgarian media outlets were not prepared overall for this pivot, for this change. On the other hand, in politics, which fuels this vicious cycle that we can talk about, in politics, parties have been striving to cut out the middleman. And we, according to traditional media theory, this could be discussed a lot among us, of course, but we are supposed to be something like the middleman, or were supposed to be. And now parties are just cutting us out by trying to talk directly to social media, through social media, to appear to their constituents, or to talk to famous hosts who have gained popularity on social media and are now giving them airtime either for free, either paid, either both. You sometimes don't get to see the arrangement because social media is not the most transparent place in the world anyway. Also, it's very murky, very shady sometimes. Sometimes you just can't follow who hosts this platform, who hosts this channel, whom it serves. We don't have the same obligation to be accountable during election campaigns in Bulgaria. So it's sometimes very easy to use social media to your own end. So on the one hand, this effect is very useful to politicians, and it shapes their messages, and public, very receptive to social media, is mostly being fed content through political content through social media. On the other hand, this further boosts polarization because individual consumption on such scale leaves this impression, this deceptive feeling that you specifically are being targeted, that the message is especially for you, that you're special. So metaphorically speaking, you're ready to pick up a fight with anyone who also think they're special because they've received a different message. And the Bulgarian public, as I mentioned in my previous response, has become very polarized in terms of core constituents. And these core voters are just picking more fights among each other. This also creates the impression in foreign media that Bulgaria is some gigantic battleground of polarization between pro-Russian, anti-Russian, etc. No, politicians are just using social media to spread their message among, of course, as many people as they can are their targets. But whoever can reach through social media, because most people would open their Facebook or their TikTok or whatever, and it's now in fact evil for other parties. And while commuting, people would scroll and like and comment, and it's easier for parties to use that. And Bulgarian vultures have become, I don't want to insult anyone, but if politicians with so many elections have become a bit lazy in their strategies and in their ideas, I think they are slowly transmitting this to voters, for whom it is easier to use the messages and to consume them this way. So it has made Bulgaria's political life look easier, but also a bit duller and unfortunately devoid of ideas.
Thanks, Angel. Going back to Poland, and I want to also ask you about the alternative media, but also how the media is weaponized. I mean, despite the fact that Civic Coalition won in October against Law and Justice, and then we have seen that the Civic platform in the European Parliament elections won outright against the Law and Justice again, but without a coalition this time. Right-wing and far-right groups are still quite powerful and enjoy still a lot of influence. And meanwhile, the media environment is still fragmented and it is still flooded with misinformation. Patrycja, how do these right and far-right groups influence the media scene in Poland?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I have to start with the statement that it's the fact that population is polarized, so the media landscape is polarized as well. So we suffer from this polarization of the society highly. And right-wing political powers are still quite powerful regarding both the media themselves and the regulators. As I said, that we have two councils regulating media in Poland, and both of them are seated by law and justice people, so they can act quite forcefully. And for example, one of the council imposed a quite high fine for one of the television for the broadcasting film about this sexual abuse in the church. So you have the clash of the agendas ideas. So media cannot feel quite free about what can they present, because they are risking the fine. And the other issue is that propaganda officers who worked in public media during the previous government are now hired by small right-wing media outlets, which are quite vivid, I would say, and still work for their political agenda. It is extremely worth mentioning that we have a central bank where the governor is one of the closest political friends of Jarosław Kaczynski. It's like all-time fellow. And so National Bank of Poland just launched its own broadcasting channel on YouTube. The name of that is Financial Observer. So it is covering mostly the economic issue, but it's also, of course, hiring media workers from public TV and serves with right-wing influence content and presenting National Bank of Poland, who supported the previous government in bright colors. So I would say that the political tension among media outlets is still quite high, and it affects the way in which people react to that.
Thank you, Patrycja. And Petr, you mentioned already that the ruling party weaponizes media and right-wing alternative media that spreads disinformation, Russian propaganda, anti-Western propaganda. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this and, if possible, bring certain concrete examples?
I do have an example, and it might be a bit shocking as well. There is a guy who is criminally prosecuted in Slovakia for several hate speech cases and other cases, and he's basically hiding in the Great Britain. There is a court process where Slovakia wants to get this guy from Great Britain to Slovakia for criminal procedure. And he's also an influencer on the internet. He runs a YouTube channel. And the Slovak Minister of the Interior, who is responsible for the police, is actually a guest, or was a guest in his program, answering his questions. So it's really a contrast between like criminal on the run, who should probably be hiding, but he's not hiding. He is interviewing the Minister of Interior, who doesn't come to legacy media, to traditional media to speak. He chooses this criminal to basically send his message around to the voters of the coalition parties. So just one case speaking for everything, right? So this guy from a cellar somewhere in the Great Britain, he's attacking journalists with really disgusting things, like texting my female colleagues, like, I know how many interruptions of your pregnancies you had in past, and this kind of really like intimidating content. So this is the people that the government and the government ministers and politicians are collaborating with while ignoring the media, the professional media, let's say. So that's just one example. Then basically they have employed the disinformation scene. That there is a lady who interviews politicians online as well, that she serves as a channel for them, who is not a journalist. She's just a popular influencer, and now they employed her as an assistant of one of the members of parliament. So basically the governing coalition pays this lady through her job for one of the coalition parties, and she is the one who interviews the members of government or the members of the governing coalition, asking them questions like, how are you today? You look so great. All the best to your birthday, Mr. Prime Minister. And this kind of, I can say, silly things, really. It's silly, it's laughable, but it works like this. And, well, Prime Minister Fico really doesn't go to give interviews to critical journalists. He's using these kind of people who either don't ask any critical questions, or as the guy who is on the run is really attacking journalists directly.
Thanks, Petr. And you mentioned Fico, and after the attempted assassination, we have seen that media was kind of used as a scapegoat and accused of this assassination attempt as well, especially the independent media, and including Aktuality was also affected by all these accusations. And meanwhile, European Parliament elections that followed this assassination attempt, we have seen that progressive Slovakia, which is a pro-European liberal party, won these elections. Could you explain, kind of explain these results to us? What do they mean? Do they mean that Fico is losing control, losing the popularity or votes and major support?
I don't think we can judge anything in general from the result of the European election, because European election in Slovakia usually has a really low turnout. This year it was a bit better than in the previous years, but there was just the context that it happened just after the assassination, just after the opposition was in the streets protesting for so many months. So the voters were not just polarized, but also mobilized a lot. But still, we had only like 30% turnout. And those people who turned and voted in the European election, they usually are those who care about European policy, who know something about it. And they tend to be the voters of the progressive Slovakia, mostly. Like people who lived abroad, came back, or just come back for the election itself. So we cannot say anything about like general Slovak population from this kind of result. So Robert Fico did not win. The opposition won the election, but also that there is another reason why Robert Fico did not win, even though he was second and he gained a decent result. There was also a party that is quite extremist, right-wing extremists. They got also a large percentage of vote. So they probably cut their share from Fico and his political allies, because they say basically the same thing. It's like extreme Euroscepticism, anti-migration, right-wing policies. Even if Mr. Fico calls himself social democrat, he's basically doing the same as Viktor Orban is doing in Hungary, and he makes no secret about it. He has shifted his party to the right, and as Mr. Orban tried to be more right than Jobbik, the extreme right party, the same goes in Slovakia, that in the parliamentary election, Mr. Fico really basically took a lot of voters from the extreme right-wing parties. And in this European election, the extreme right-wing party took some of the voters back. So that's why Mr. Fico did not win.
Thank you very much for interpreting this result for our listeners. And Angel, I also want to ask you, how high up was press freedom or like media in general in the electoral campaigns in Bulgaria before the general and European Parliament elections?
Well, I don't think that press freedom, in terms of to simplify, is a matter during an election. In terms of what we feel free to report or what we don't feel free to report, was a big issue in itself during the election campaign. I think all the press issues and all the press freedom issues that you can highlight in Bulgaria stemmed from attitudes of the media during, let's say, peacetime, electoral peacetime, when there's no election, which in Bulgaria has not become the norm. But you can see some great challenges. You can even begin from challenges that normally you wouldn't think about seeing in the media. You wouldn't think of categorizing as issues. Maybe you will ask me about specific obstacles to journalists during the elections, but I can say that thinking it more and more the last days, especially as I'm seeing how the political crisis is not being resolved, and we are still treading in the same place, with the same shoes, with the same attitude. I can see that one of the biggest obstacles that we've also seen manifest during elections is an effort to remain relevant. What I mean? To take from the previous question that you asked about how social media is shaping the attitude, even the sheer agenda of the media and how they cover political processes as intense as elections or less intense or protests or others shows lack of desire to go deep into things, deep into issues. And it's not always about self-censorship. It's a model that we are having here in Bulgaria. Imagine the morning shows. When you have morning shows on TV, in some countries, there you have some short political module, you have entertainment, you have sports. In Bulgaria, if you have 3 or 4 hours of a morning show, 2.5 would be dominated by endless talking heads saying all the same all the time. If we transpose this to websites, Bulgarian websites will normally have a mixture of, if not copy-pasting, just replicating the kind of content, competition a la Bulgara, when you see something somewhere and just want to have the same thing, and you don't copy-paste, you can retell it. But, you need to have the story desperately. Or, if not have the same story desperately, just market in a way, you just waste away journalist resources to make sure that you did the same thing, the kind of thing that your peer in the other media outlet did. So in this situation, this is what question would be. You can imagine why a user of social media would bother to watch this serious content, is serious, quote unquote, if they can see the same kind of message repeated on and on in social media. And from there come several issues that we are also facing during election time. One is that even in non-election time, we are hugely cash-strapped because social media has taken from legacy media a lot of advertising revenue. And these issues have been going on for quite a while. So you have this fact of being cash-strapped influences inevitably the state of the media's coverage, and they would either turn up to corporate interests and then also resort sometimes to self-censorship, maybe cover this or that story a bit later than it's supposed to, maybe just cover one side but give the other side airtime, but do it subtly in such a way that it will be obvious that one side is right and the other wrong, when life is not that simple. So even when we are cash hungry, we, meaning the media overall, we do find subtle ways to protect our risky economic interests. You can also imagine the situation when you don't have a clear political center of power. And not having a clear political center of power, you don't know if you are a small local media outlet, if you are a media outlet depending on some government advertising, you don't know what the next government will be like. You don't know who you will get this government advertising from, this municipal or whatever, because also municipalities are very much dependent. They're not very decentralized in Bulgaria. So in between election periods, you have slap cases, which also reflect the media's credibility during election time. And if they felt stressed as well, there's no election. During the election, they're trying to secure their coffers a bit to protect themselves from a future step case where they will feel defenseless. Like, for example, there was a very prominent case with a very respectable independent media outlet. It's called Mediapool, and Mediapool was sued by a big insurance company for just having reported and for just having shared the minutes of a government meeting where changes to insurance legislation had been reported, where they had been discussed already at the meeting, and there were the suggestion, the claim from the insurance company was that the media outlet a retracted story that it published some addition which does not suggest or imply the insurance company's involvement into the discussions, etc. So these kind of cases are not systemic, but they have increased. I can think of 2 or 3 more over the past years. And I can give an example of the last government, the last elected government, was suggesting it would finally comply with EU rules to change the slap cases, the protection against slap cases. But since it was gone, since it knew it would disintegrate, it had no proper time to pursue this. Also, now during elections, you would suppose that since Parliament is still open under our new legislation, you would assume that journalists would have access to politicians. And this is not true anymore, because Parliament moved supposedly temporarily to another building that had been used in the past. In this building, journalists operate out of practically the basement with no proper venues to interact with politicians, which had been an essential part of political reporting. There have always been spaces where journalists and politicians can meet informally. These spaces in the new Parliament building disappeared. So you can see, I can think of direct examples of maybe threats, of cases where certain media outlets have been obviously favorized to others, and this being seen as a way to silence specific media outlets and specific journalists, and not to give them information and restrict access to information of specific media outlets. But I think the biggest problem comes from those small, subtle details which stresses out during non-election times, and during election time, they are always visible and still prevent us from doing our work. Not to mention DDoS attacks that have become typical for every election campaign and have targeted my website and many other websites for years now.
Thanks, Angel. I guess here we can wrap it up. Patrycja, Peter, Angel, thank you again very much for joining in today. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us on this episode of Media Freedom in Focus. For more in-depth podcasts on the state of press freedom in Europe, visit mfrr.eu or search MFRR in Focus in your podcast apps. For more information about IPI's Central Europe Independent Media Network, visit ipi.media. Thank you, and until next.